Thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Maronite Patriarch Bshara Da'i urges lawmakers to attend parliamentary sessions to elect a new president. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnouk announces a plan to help Lebanese citizens leave the eastern Bekaa border village of Tufail via a safe route. And pilgrims from across the globe attend Easter Sunday masses across the Holy Land. Maronite Patriarch Bshara Da'i is urging lawmakers to attend parliamentary sessions to elect a new president, calling on prioritizing Lebanon's national interests. During his Easter sermon in Kirki, Da'i stressed it was an honor for lawmakers to elect the head of state. Da'i addressed President Michel Sleiman, who attended the sermon following a closed-door meeting between the two. The Patriarch praised Sleiman for fulfilling his role and restoring Lebanon's status quo in the international community. Da'i also expressed hope that wars and violence around the world will come to an end. President Michel Sleiman reiterates his adamant opposition to the extension of his term as head of state, which ends on May the 25th. Following a meeting behind closed doors with Maronite Patriarch Bshara Da'i in Kirki, Sleiman says the extension of his term is undemocratic. The president also underlined his support for Lebanese forces leader Samir Geaghe's presidential election platform, which he described as national and sovereign. Geaghe announced his presidential election platform on Wednesday during a press conference in his Ma'rab residence, in which he vowed to apply the constitution and the country's laws and promised many economic and social reforms if he was elected president. Lebanon's parliament will convene on April the 23rd to elect a new president to succeed Michel Sleiman. Greek Orthodox Archbishop of Beirut, Elias Aoudeh, says if a new president is elected within the constitutional deadline, then Lebanon will be moving on to the right track. In his Easter sermon at the St. George Cathedral in downtown Beirut, Aoudeh said all vacuum posts in the state should be filled with competent employees. The Archbishop reiterates that he favors a civil state that treats its people equally and relies on the importance of people's qualifications and expertise in choosing the right individual for each post. He noted that the public post aims at serving the people rather than personal, sectarian, or political interests. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnouk has announced that a plan has been drawn up to help Lebanese citizens leave the eastern Bekaa border village of Tufail via a safe route. Mashnouk says the road will be guarded by legitimate Lebanese force to make sure that no armed Syrian opposition fighters are hidden among the evacuating residents. The announcement comes after a security meeting led by Mashnouk earlier in the Interior Ministry to discuss the situation in Tufail. The meeting was attended by security apparatus chiefs as well as Hezbollah's liaison unit official Wafit Safa. The meeting was followed by a closed session between General Security Director General Major Abbas Brahim, Safa and Mashnouk. Over 4,000 Lebanese citizens and 10,000 Syrian refugees are currently under siege in the border town of Tufail, living without supplies of food, electricity, shelter, or aid for 4 months. The Lebanese army has arrested 6 Syrians over the weekend in the Bekaa Valley. A statement from the military says the men were arrested in the area around Beit Lahya for illegally entering Lebanese territories. The national news agency says the detainees were a group of Syrian fighters from an extremist group and were captured by the military after being ambushed in the town of Beit Lahya. The annual Lebanon Mountain Trail Through Walk gets underway with scores of hikers signing up for walks across the country. Organizers hope the event will encourage internal tourism and raise awareness about Lebanon's nature reserves. The Lebanon Mountain Trail is much more than a hiking route. The walking paths that stretch the length of our mountain ranges have been imprinted by centuries worth of feet, whether those of farmers, lovers, hunters, invading armies, or passing explorers. So as much as a trip up to the Lebanon Mountain Trail is a glorious scenic expedition, it's also an unparalleled opportunity to discover Lebanon's history and the conservation work and familial spirit of those modern mountain men and the communities they work with. Syria has shipped out or destroyed approximately 80% of its declared chemical weapons material. Sigrid Kaag, Special Coordinator of the Joint Mission of the United Nations and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, says if the momentum was sustained, Syria should be able to meet its April 27th deadline to hand over all declared chemical agents. She says the renewed pace in movements is positive and necessary to ensure progress towards a tight deadline. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had agreed with the United States and Russia to dispose of the chemical weapons, an arsenal which Damascus had never formally acknowledged, after hundreds of people were killed in a sarin gas attack on the outskirts of the capital last August. Washington and its Western allies say it was Assad's forces that unleashed the nerve agent in the world's worst chemical attack in a quarter of a century. The government blamed the rebel side in Syria's civil war, which is now in its fourth year. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has visited the ancient Christian town of Ma'loula on this Easter Sunday, which his troops recently recaptured from rebels. State television conveyed Assad's Easter wishes to the people and says the president is hoping for the re-establishment of peace and security throughout Syria, without showing images of the visit. It added that Assad had inspected the Mar Sarkis monastery, damaged in recent fighting. It says the damage had been caused by terrorists, using the regime's term for rebels. Assad has rarely made public appearances since the outbreak of a revolt against his regime in March of 2011. Syria's large Christian minority has sought neutrality throughout the three-year war and has viewed the Sunni-led rebels with growing concern as jihadists have flocked to their ranks. And coming up next, late Pope John Paul II will be declared a saint on the 27th of this month. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Pilgrims and local Christians have attended Easter Sunday Masses across the Holy Land. In Jerusalem, hundreds of pilgrims arrived at the Old City's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they attended a festive Mass to celebrate Jesus' resurrection. Local Christians were joined by pilgrims from all over the world in a procession towards the church, which was led by Roman Catholic Patriarch Fuad Tual. Tual led the faithful in prayer at the traditional site of Jesus' crucifixion, burial, and resurrection, which is considered one of Christianity's most sacred sites. Orthodox Palestinians and worshippers in the West Bank town of Bethlehem attended Easter Sunday prayers at the Church of the Nativity, revered as the birthplace of Jesus. In Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip, a small community of Palestinian Orthodox Christians convened for Mass with prayers and hymns in a local church. Easter Sunday marks the culmination of Holy Week, which begins with Palm Sunday and commemorates the resurrection of Jesus 3 days after his death by crucifixion. And at the Vatican, Pope Francis has celebrated Easter Mass with a message of social solidarity as the world's Orthodox marked a holiday marred by bitter divisions over Ukraine and clashes in Jerusalem. Francis led the ceremony for the holiest day in the Christian calendar on St. Peter's Square, which will be followed by a special blessing and address to crowds of Catholics faithful in the famous Vatican Piazza. At an Easter vigil on Saturday, Francis asked Catholics to bring the fire which Jesus had kindled in the world to all the people. This is Francis's second Easter since he was elected by fellow cardinals in March last year, promising to make the Catholic Church less Vatican-centric, more transparent, and closer to ordinary people. A police officer and a conscript have been killed after armed attackers opened fire on their patrol car in the latest deadly assault against the country's security forces. The deaths came just 2 days after a police officer was killed in a bomb blast in Cairo's Lebanon Square. Egypt's Interior Ministry says those killed in the latest attack were patrolling the road between Cairo and Suez. Fighters have stepped up their attacks against security forces since the army ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in July of last year. A little-known armed group, Ajnad Misr, has vowed fresh attacks against security forces in retaliation for their crackdown on Morsi's supporters that, according to Amnesty International, has claimed 1,400 lives. Official figures show that more than 500 people, mostly policemen and soldiers, have been killed in bombing and shooting assaults by fighters since July. Rebels have killed 14 Algerian soldiers in an ambush during a patrol in the mountains east of Algiers. The attack in Tizi Ouzou, 120 kilometers east of the capital, was the deadliest in years against the country's security forces. No one has so far claimed responsibility for the attack. But Al-Qaeda's North African branch, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, is active in Algeria. Reporters on the ground say the attack comes off the back of Abdelaziz Bouteflika's election victory at the weekend and seems to have taken place after a lapse in security. 4 French journalists held captive in Syria for more than 10 months have returned home to France, freshly shaved and beaming, where they were greeted at an airbase by President François Hollande, their families and friends. Nicolas Henat, Pierre Torres, Edouard Elias and Didier François smiled at a crowd of journalists, some of them colleagues, after descending from a military helicopter at the Villacoublay airbase, southwest of Paris. French authorities have released no details of their liberation, but Turkey's Dogan news agency first reported that an unknown group transported the journalists blindfolded and with hands bound on Friday night to the southeastern border of Turkey, where they were discovered by Turkish soldiers. After identifying themselves as journalists, the group was taken to police headquarters and seen by doctors. Separatists have declared a curfew in the eastern Ukraine town of Slavyansk. This comes following a shootout at a checkpoint set up by pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine has left 1 person dead and others hospitalized with gunshot wounds. Reports say today's armed clash near the city of Slavyansk appeared to be the first since an international agreement was reached last week in Geneva to ease tensions in eastern Ukraine, where pro-Russian supporters have seized government buildings in at least 10 cities. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry says details of the incident are not yet clear. And now for news around the world in brief. Late Pope John Paul II will be declared a saint on the 27th of this month and will be canonized by the present Pope Francis. John Paul II was the first non-Italian pope for 455 years, leaving an indelible impression on the Church and the world during the 26 years of his papacy. Police in Pakistan say gunmen have shot a famous television talk show host amid a wave of attacks on journalists in the country. Hamid Mir, a host on the private television broadcaster Jio, was wounded in the attack near Karachi's airport as he was traveling to the office of his employer. Police say a single gunman first opened fire on Mir's car, followed by others who chased him on motorcycles. Japan has started to construct a coastal surveillance unit near a string of islands at the center of a bitter territorial dispute with China. Reports say radar equipment will be placed on Yonaguni Island to monitor ships and aircraft in the East China Sea. Japan's defense ministry says the Ground Self-Defense Force surveillance unit, comprising around 150 personnel, will be deployed on Yonaguni by the end of March of 2016. Divers have recovered 13 more bodies from inside the ferry that sank off South Korea nearly 4 days ago, bringing the confirmed death toll to 68. Officials say the bodies were recovered after divers gained access to the inside of the ferry after 3 days of failed attempts due to strong currents. 3 bodies were pulled out of the fully submerged ferry just before midnight. The ferry, carrying 476 passengers, many of them school children, capsized on Wednesday. Around 174 people have been rescued, but hopes are fading for the 266 people who remain missing. The captain of the ferry has been arrested on suspicion of negligence and abandoning people in need. 2 other crew members have also been taken into custody, including a junior officer whom a prosecutor said was steering in challenging waters unfamiliar to her when the accident occurred. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai urges lawmakers to attend parliamentary sessions to elect a new president. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnouk announces a plan to help Lebanese citizens leave the eastern Bekaa border village of Tufail via a safe route. And pilgrims from across the globe attend Easter Sunday Masses across the Holy Land. Those were your Sunday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and on behalf of our team, I wish you all a very happy Easter.
هيدا حقكم وحصلتوا عليه، الله يوفقكم.